Hello. Until very recently, it had been a great many years since I last played a game of 40k. But with the release of the brand new edition, it seemed like a great time to collect a new army, to take on a summer project that would see me building a retro Space Marine force that could be used in the new 11th edition or my preferred 2nd edition of the game. So far, I have collected up some of my favourite Space Marine miniatures ever from 40k history, including the original Jez Goodwin Space Marine Terminators box and a Rogue Trader era Land Raider. Most recently, I picked up a Metal Dreadnought from the 90s, and I am really pleased with how my army is coming together. But more than that, I have actually now played my first game of 11th edition, and it was interesting. The game itself was fantastic, but I had quite a confusing time actually trying to build my army for it when I didn't really understand all of the systems despite reading the core rules. So this is going to be an update on where my army is at so far, how my first battle went, and what went wrong when I used this classic Citadel miniatures case to transport my army to the battle, and it didn't go perfectly. I'm Jordan, this is Jordan Sorcery, and today is the latest installment in my Space Marine diary. Right, let's start with where I'm at in terms of the collecting of this force. So we've got those Space Marine Terminators, we've got the Land Raider, we've also got some Space Marine Scouts from the 1997 era Jez Goodwin range. That was where I was starting from. I've added to that since with a brand new Dreadnought, well, a brand old Dreadnought, the old 1990s one, which I absolutely love. I think it's a fantastic model. This still needs to be glued together. Some of the parts have already been glued, but I still need to put the arms and the legs on properly, as well as the banner. But I'm really looking forward to painting this because I think that these are fantastic models and they are just still so impressive. I kind of prefer this era of Dreadnought to the later ones, which they do make more sense because they've got knees and they can sort of walk properly. But there's something about this version, this old classic version, that really speaks to me. Not only that, but I think I mentioned last time that I was missing the 2 guns on the Land Raider that I was provided with from 7th City Collectables. Now, I was able to get hold of those in a box of random plastic bits, which is an absolutely amazing find. It was a Space Marine paint set just stuffed to the gills with random plastic and a couple of metal components from the Rogue Trader era. They were totally gunked up with paint, but I've been able to strip them, and they actually have come out pretty well. So both guns, I think we'll be able to add those. I also need to put the bolter onto the Land Raider as well. But once that's on, we should have a complete Land Raider from Rogue Trader. And potentially even cooler is that amongst that random plastic, there was also about 10 RTB01s. Again, they were completely gunked up with paint, classic stuff. I think I painted many miniatures exactly the same way, almost dipping them into paint. And some of the arms had been attached using blue tack, and then they'd been glued as well. So that was really fun to discover in the paint stripper. But I think it's just the way a lot of kids would put together their armies back in the day, whatever it took to get them painted and on a table as quickly as possible. So I have been more than guilty of that in my time as well. But using these 10 RTB01s, I was able to put together a legal force for 11th edition that I could then actually take and play with a friend. So that was my big mission for this last couple of weeks, was to take it and to try and get an actual game of 11th edition in, see if I understood the rules, see what a Space Marine army feels like in the modern game, and really just get used to rolling dice at a 40k table once again. If you watched my live stream, I went through all of the core rules for the 11th edition, and they weren't too dissimilar to those that I remembered from probably somewhere around 6th, 7th, or 8th. I don't really recall the specific edition that I played last. But yeah, it didn't seem like it had changed that much. Obviously, there were a couple of major callouts, major changes, and there were things like coherency rules changing and stuff of that nature. But for the most part, it felt quite familiar. I guess the biggest change was the move of the stats from being on your individual models to being on the weapons that they were carrying. It's a much more Age of Sigmar style of presentation, where you're being told specifically what you need to roll for your weapon skill or ballistic skill, instead of the actual stats of the person and then applying that to the weapon profile. it works quite nicely. It's quite effective. I can totally understand why they've moved to this, especially in terms of competitive play. I imagine it's a lot more fluid and fast moving. And in Age of Sigmar, I think it works really well. I didn't have a problem with it in 40k, though, as a very old school minded individual, part of me missed certain things and like ways of working out what your to hit rolls were going to be and stuff of that nature. And I completely understand that that's pure rose tinted, just personal preference. I don't think those old rules are better. I think they've probably cleaned up a lot of stuff and made things a lot more fluid and efficient with this latest edition. So yeah, I certainly wouldn't complain about any of those rule changes, really. Having not played for a number of years, I also, it actually doesn't feel like it's moved that far from the earlier versions of the game that I played a lot more of. It still felt like 40k to me, and because we were doing a take and hold mission, it was just very familiar. Space Marines versus Necrons across a cityscape. Yeah, good stuff. I enjoyed it in terms of gameplay perfectly well. But what those core rules don't have in them are the actual way that you make an army for this edition. Now, I know some of that will come in the actual core box and the rules. Some of that comes with the actual codexes that give you a bit more information and help you understand what you have in terms of options. But I didn't have access to most of that. So I wanted to build my army using stuff like the faction packs that have been released, the PDFs. Initially, I actually thought that the faction pack included all of the datasheets, but I was quickly disabused of that notion when I couldn't find Tactical Marines in there, despite them being referenced multiple times. So I now know that those faction packs only include the things that have changed since the last Codex book. So seeing as I didn't have the 10th edition Codex, that was a bit of a challenge. I had to sort of work through that and was able to use an app online, New Recruit, I think it's called, to build out an army list and to get some of those statistics and to understand what was what. But more difficult than that, well, a couple of things, I suppose. One is that the faction pack is not alphabetized. So I'm sure there is some order to these PDFs, but it was very difficult to actually go through and sort of find things, especially when it came to stuff like the detachments, which are their own kettle of fish, because that confused me quite a bit. But the detachments are also not alphabetized, so you're just sort of having to move around and try and find it. I guess they're ordered by some specifics, whether that's the total number of detachment points they cost or something else, but I don't know why they're not alphabetized. It seems like a strange choice. Same for all of the data sheets at the back. They just seem to be in any old order. It starts with a load of characters, and then you go through to a load of stuff, and then it's legacy stuff, and then it's back to other new stuff. So really weird, I thought, and it made it quite difficult to navigate that. But I accept that you're not supposed to use that PDF as your sort of main. That is a resource to help you with the transition between editions. That's not going to be a replacement for a codex or anything like that. But yes, just very odd in terms of that layout, I thought. But knowing that we were going to do a 750-point game, I chose the Reclamation Force detachment. So, again, I haven't used detachments in quite a long time. They did exist, and they existed in something like this way last time I played. But yes, understanding that you have a certain number of detachment points and you can buy your detachment, and then that is going to influence some additional enhancements that you have access to, options that you can equip your forces with. That's all a little bit, it's fine once you get your head around it and you know these things, but it wasn't that clear that this is what was happening and that you had to buy this and then you had to buy that. You didn't just get a load of like battalion rules for buying it. You had to buy the actual enhancements and specify which ones you were going to buy. You only get access to a certain number based on other factors about the force. So all of that was kind of a bit fiddly for someone who hasn't played in a while. I am sure there is a how to play guide in the base box that is a bit easier to actually walk you through it, but fathoming it out without access to that was a bit tricky, I would say. And this, I've played a lot of other Warhammer games and play other current Warhammer games, but coming to this cold, or relatively cold, it wasn't the smoothest way in. Like I say, I'm sure if you actually come in and buy a starter box and get all of those rules, it's probably a lot simpler. There's probably easier ways. But even going through Warcom's how to get started building your army for 11th edition articles, there were a lot of things that just weren't covered, that were kind of that expected that you already understood them. So that's just my experience. This is someone coming from a weird angle. I'm sure most people who are playing 40k have been playing 40k for ages, and if you've never played it, your first game is probably going into a store, is probably buying the brand new boxes. There probably aren't that many people coming to it from this weird sideways perspective that I'm coming to it from. So my criticism there is most likely unique to me, I guess. So I had decided that my 750-point army was going to be a reclamation force, and with it, I took 2 enhancements. One is the Seal of Reconquest, which gave me access to a 5+ invulnerable save for someone, and the Scroll of Proclamation, which would allow me to re-roll a charge roll if I needed to. So those were the enhancements that I took. It obviously also gives you a load of stratagems that you can use. They are another one of these things that is... they've been around for a long time. I have used them. You use them in Age of Sigmar. There are similar things in other games, of course. They're a little bit faffy, to my mind, just because you have to remember all of these different abilities that you have. Sometimes it's really, really powerful. Sometimes it doesn't feel like any of them are really that useful. So yeah, I think maybe that's something that a few more games with I will get a better handle on. But this 750-point force, got to stop distracting myself. I had chosen just a really simple army. It was going to be a tactical squad of 10 Marines. It was going to be a captain in Terminator armor, 5 Terminators, a unit of 5 scouts, and a Land Raider. So a very small force, one that just did not make a lot of sense, especially not going up against Necrons. I didn't have many sort of anti-personnel weapons that I would need, like powerful anti-personnel weapons. I hadn't really done the proper equipment loadouts for the tactical squad and for the Terminators. So we were kind of just going on what I had with me, which was kind of, not that great. So not an optimized list by any means, but the game itself was really good fun. We played 4 turns, we had 4 objectives. They were literally just scattered across the map, take and hold, and also, obviously fight each other. My opponents had a beautifully painted Necron army. I had mostly unpainted Space Marines, except for the 10 RTB-01s, because this was before I had actually stripped them. So they were just these blobs of paint running around. But it was really very cool to have RTB-01s and a Rogue Trader era Land Raider and the original Terminators. Like, it was cool to have this real retro army on the table. Yes, they weren't painted, so they weren't that impressive because of that. But a number of people came over. We were playing in a local store. They saw the Land Raider especially, and people really enjoyed that. It was great to see that sort of thing on the table. The Land Raider performed excellently. I did not realize that Land Raiders had such a good control point statistic, so I could have made better use of the Land Raider in that way. As it was, I just drove the Land Raider around and just squandered its last cannon shots on just these random targets, but it vaporized pretty much everything it shot. An absolute ridiculous overcommitment of firepower to single Necrons. Although I did take out, I forget what they're called, but one of the big sort of tripod-esque walker guys that is like a buffing unit for its fellow Necrons that helps them regenerate. So that was very satisfying to just completely vaporize that in one go. But yes, the Land Raider didn't really do very much. I didn't make the most of it as a transport either. I should have absolutely had my Terminators in it, or my Tactical Marines. But yeah, so lessons learned on that front. My Terminators didn't really do very much. They just sort of they sprinted across the map and kind of got tangled up against a load of Necrons with their big claws. Again, I forget what they're called. That was quite a good fight, quite an even matchup, but the Tactical Marines, who also found themselves in that same fight, just got completely destroyed. So the Tactical Marines didn't really do very much either. The actual very, I think not really the MVPs, because I think that probably was the Land Raider because it's just cool, but the Scout Squad, they immediately deployed into an objective or around an objective. They moved up to it and they took it in the first turn. Then they held it. It was on top of a building, and they just laid down suppressive fire. They did a really good job. They took out some Necrons. They fought bravely, and they were quite difficult to dislodge as well. So the Scouts performed very well. I really wish I had taken a Scout with a sniper, but I didn't have the models yet. I have now got 2 of them. One is broken, so I'm going to have to do a little bit of modeling to add the actual barrel back onto the sniper. The other one is probably, sadly, the miniature that has come out of the paint stripping process with the least success. So I might have to put it back in for a strip again, but it's lost a lot of detail on the face and across the chest because it's very tight and very close in. So a lot of that paint is still really clinging to the model, and that's kind of taken a lot of detail away. So that's a real shame. It's one of my favorites. It's the guy who sort of crouched over. But yeah, the other models have all come through the paint stripping process really well, so that is fantastic. The RTB01s mostly look okay. Some of them still look a bit gunked up, and there's a lot of glue on some of them, so they're probably not going to be perfect. They're never going to be, they're never going to get back into top of the line. They very much have a sort of a bishop in Alien 3 vibe, but when they're telling Ripley, I'll never be what I once was, because some of these guys came out of the paint stripper and all of the bits of their arms are falling off, their backpacks are falling off, their torsos are falling off. So the glue has gone on some of those guys. Obviously, I will reassemble them, but some of them have just really gunked up with these chunks of like glue and paint that would probably take a lot of effort to really get rid of. And some even have, like, the pigment from the paint has kind of dyed the plastic as well. So there's a couple of these guys that they're never going to be top of the line. And that's absolutely fine, because I don't think in the long run the RTB01s are going to be the actual main tactical squad that I use. I might use them as a secondary tactical squad if I play a larger game, but my intention is to field the RTB15 strike force. So I've talked about this before. I had a bit of a hiccup in getting hold of an RTB15 strike force. The wrong thing was sent to me, an Imperial War Altar, which I had returned, and then there was a load of kerfuffle around getting a refund sorted, and then the person who received the actual box I was supposed to get didn't return it, so I couldn't get it sent out to me. So all of that transaction was all scrapped. Eventually, I was able to get a refund through eBay directly, so that was good. But yeah, that left me at a bit of a lurch, but fortunately, I have since been able to get hold of a strike force. It is looking good. So I am very excited to have a Space Marine Strike Force to actually field those versions of the early Space Marines, the Jez Goodwin. There's 3 different metals in there, and there's 15 in total. Really, really nice, but that's going to be a 10-man tactical squad made up of those particular Marine models rather than the RTB01s, just because I prefer them, basically. So that's, and that's the driving force for the entire army. So that's that. Very excited about that. I have also gotten hold of this model, which hopefully you'll be able to see. There you go. So this guy is actually a Mechanicus, Adeptus Mechanicus chap from the Rogue Trader era. It is not a Tech Marine, but I'm going to be using it as a Tech Marine. It's in power armor. I think it's a really, really great model. I absolutely love it. I was taking a look at the Rogue Trader era Tech Marines, and although I think some of them are great, there's a couple who are like carrying their toolboxes that looks like a lunchbox, which I think is fantastic. But yeah, I think for me, I really love this model, and there's some art that goes with this model that I think is fantastic, which I think might be Paul Bonner. But yeah, just really, really great. So, as a big fan of it, I wanted to get that particular model. So that's going to be my Tech Marine to go with my Land Raider in a 2nd edition army. There is the Dreadnought as well. So that is filling out the army pretty much entirely, I think. There was talk of a chaplain, which I may still try and get hold of. I think I've probably got more than enough options for a 1,000 point army, which I think is probably the limit I want to get to. So we're kind of feeling pretty good in terms of the miniatures, in terms of the actual makeup of the force itself. As you can see, nothing is painted yet. So that is a big priority for me. I've got a game coming up in a few weeks, so there's still time for me to put paint on these guys. I want to have as much of the army, if not all, if I have time, if not all, than most. He says, repeating, trying to convince himself. Hopefully, I will have a good chunk of it painted in order to get it on the table for that game. But there's, I don't want to put too much pressure on myself. As long as I'm moving in the right direction, I think is the kind of thing I want to be, mindful. So that is the plan. We'll have a Terminator squad, captain and librarian in Terminator armor. We'll have a tactical Marines squad of 10 Marines. There will be a scout squad with snipers. There will be the Land Raider. There will be the Dreadnought. There may be the Tech Marine as well. What the 1,000 point detachment will be, I don't know yet. It might be a reclamation force again. It might be something slightly different. So we'll find out. But yeah, that is the army, and I think that that is looking quite good. But then we've got the actual transportation of the army. So I used this classic Citadel box. This was not the earliest of the plastic carry cases. If you remember those really early ones in the 90s that kind of had the feel of basically like a briefcase, and they had yeah, they had the sponge, the sort of interlocking tooth sponge. They were classics of their time. They weren't necessarily the best transport cases. But this one, these are normally pretty good. So these have got actually the foam lining has been designed so that you can just put your miniatures straight in, and it's got 3 levels to it. So they look like this. So that's all pretty good stuff. Now, I had the bright idea, because I am just completely clueless and a ridiculous person, to remove one of the layers, because that would allow me to also carry the Land Raider in this box. So as well as the actual Marines, it would let me put the Land Raider in too. And I thought, at the time, that the Land Raider and would sort of be sandwiched between the layers at the bottom that had all of the individual Marines in, and then the layer at the top would keep it safe, and the pressure from the Land Raider would keep everybody in place down below. Now, of course, that was not the case, because you carry this thing like a briefcase. So all of the metal models, very heavy, they all just fell to the bottom and were just sort of swishing around. Now, thankfully, I was not punished by the universe for this utter stupidity. And nothing broke. You know, touch wood, everything came through okay, including the Land Raider. I was able to get all my army to the game without any damage, and I was able to get them home without any damage as well. So, you know, no harm, no foul. But I did learn that I really need to stop and think a little bit more. I mean, I was remembering as a kid when I used to go to like Warhammer clubs after school or at lunchtimes, and I couldn't afford an actual carry case back then. So I used to use ice cream tubs. So quite deep ice cream tubs full of whatever sponge was available, whatever foam I'd been able to steal from some other, tech product or something like that my family had bought, and I would just get hold of the foam and then and put it into my ice cream tub. And I basically would create, like, I'd line the bottom of the tub, stick everybody in it, and then put some sponge on top and just hope for the best. Elastic bands around them. So was remembering that era, which was probably not the most effective era either, and definitely led to the destruction of plenty of miniatures. I think my Witch Elf on Pegasus probably didn't get any favours from that kind of transportation, but needs must. So where does that leave us right now? Well, as I mentioned before, I still need to paint as many of these miniatures as I can before my next game, where I want the full army on the table. I have gotten hold of a couple of colour forged spray cans. I'm going to be using their 2 different shades of purple. They just released a new one. I'm not sponsored by Colour Forged. I just have heard that they're good. So I'm going to be painting those up using the sprays, doing some edge highlights and stuff like that. Quite excited about that. It's going to be a purple-based army. I've not finally settled. I think I need to sort out what the highlight paint is going to be, but they're not going to be particularly detailed. I just want them to look okay and to look consistent, and to have... I think even if you don't do a great job with that much detail, if it's across an entire army and there's a couple of highlights across it, then it can still look quite impressive from a distance on the tabletop. And that, I am hoping, will be my friend in this project. So besides the painting, I also need to finalize the name of my chapter and the background for my chapter. I've talked before about actually writing up some of my own lore, kind of giving these guys this story around being historians and archivists within the Imperium. I think that's a cool line to take. I think there's a lot of fun stuff to explore in that space, so I'm going to try and find some time to sit down and write that out, just because I think that's a fun part of the project. and name all my characters and give them a little bit of background as well, because I think, that can make games even more exciting if you know it's this person going up against that person and they bear a grudge from a previous matchup and so on and so forth. So there's still that to be done, but that kind of is the majority of the project. It's really just those things, like getting the background sorted, getting it painted, and then playing this big game that I'm really looking forward to. Then we'll see where we go after that. I do want to spend a bit of time making up my 2nd edition army list. That's going to be, I think, quite a different process. I'm much more familiar with it. There's not quite as many choices in quite the same way. I'm going to be doing a book club, GW book club, with my good friend Stu, where we're going to take a look at the Ultramarines Codex from the 2nd edition. So I think that's going to be a great opportunity to refamiliarize myself with the 2nd edition version of the rules, which I still look back fondly on. So I think that will be really fun. But the game I'm playing is going to be 11th edition as well. So I need to refine my army list, sort out some of the equipment choices, optimize it a little bit, and, learn from my many mistakes in this most recent game, and then look forward to playing once again. Here on the channel, I will be doing a history of Dreadnoughts next, and I will be coming back with my next diary where I will be talking about my painting and my background. Those are the final things that need to be done, so I will have to talk about them. There will be no escape, don't worry. I feel like things have been going really, really well. I've had a lot of fun so far. There's still loads of fun to have in the future, and it's really feeling like it's very possible. Now, I say that as someone who now has, however many marine models that are all bare metal and bare plastic. I don't want to end the project with that being the case. So I'm quite optimistic that I will get these to the painting table and I will get some paint on them, and that next time in this diary series, things will be looking very different. They'll be looking far more colourful. Until then, thank you very much for watching. I'm Jordan, and this is Jordan Sorcery.